On June 2, 1953, Westminster Abbey became the center of a Britain still carrying wartime memory, ration book habits, and an old imperial vocabulary that no longer fit the world quite as easily as it once had. Elizabeth Alexandra Mary Windsor was 27 years old. She had already been queen since her father, George VI, died in February 1952. But the coronation was the public act that clothed that private succession in law, liturgy, oath, spectacle, and national memory. The ceremony was ancient in form. It used a sacred space where English and later British monarchs had been crowned for centuries. It drew on an order of service shaped by medieval kingship, Reformation religion, parliamentary settlement, and imperial ceremony. The regalia, the anointing, the oath, the recognition by the people, and the crowning all belonged to a ritual language older than radio, older than empire, and older than most of the institutions now watching it. The point was continuity, the claim that even after war and death and political change, the crown endured. Yet the day was also unmistakably modern. The most important argument before the ceremony was not about a crown or a procession. It was about cameras. Should television be allowed to show the coronation inside the abbey? Some officials worried that broadcasting the sacred parts of the rite would cheapen them or turn worship into theater. Others saw television as the only way a mass public could witness an event being performed in its name. The decision to televise much of the ceremony helped turn the coronation into a media landmark. Families crowded around new sets. Neighbors gathered in living rooms. In Britain, television ownership accelerated because people wanted to see the young queen crowned. This mattered because the coronation was not simply a royal family event. It was a national and Commonwealth performance at a moment when Britain's global position was changing. India and Pakistan had become independent in 1947. Other colonies were moving towards self-government or independence. The language of empire still appeared in public life, but the structure beneath it was shifting toward a looser Commonwealth and toward states that would increasingly define their own futures. The coronation tried to speak to all of them at once. Tradition for Britain, association for the Commonwealth, dignity for a monarchy that needed to look both ancient and adaptable. Inside Westminster Abbey, the ritual placed Elizabeth in a role larger than personality. The coronation oath connected monarchy to law, religion, and government. The anointing, treated as the most sacred part, marked the sovereign as set apart for service rather than merely displayed for applause. The regalia carried layers of symbolism: sword, orb, scepter, ring, and crown. To modern viewers, these objects could look remote, but their purpose was to translate power into obligation. The monarch was not being shown as a celebrity. She was being bound to an office. Outside the Abbey, London staged the other half of the story. Crowds lined the route despite rain and long waits. Military units, carriages, uniforms, bands, flags, and police barriers turned the city into a ceremonial corridor. For many families, the day became a shared post-war memory, not because daily life was suddenly easy, but because spectacle offered a sense of renewal. Britain had endured bombing, austerity, bereavement, and political change. The coronation promised stability, without pretending the old world had returned unchanged. The television audience changed the meaning of pageantry. Earlier coronations had been seen directly by a small elite and indirectly by the public through newspapers, newsreels, paintings, and memory. In 1953, millions could watch moving images of the ceremony almost as it happened. That altered the relationship between monarchy and public. The sovereign was still elevated, but the rite was brought into ordinary homes. The Abbey entered the living room. Public loyalty became intertwined with broadcast intimacy. There were tensions inside that intimacy. A camera can democratize access, but it can also flatten mystery. A ritual designed for distance had to survive close-up viewing. The coronation therefore became a test of whether monarchy could use modern media without losing its aura. In that sense, the day forecast much of the later 20th century. The royal institution would increasingly live through screens. Ceremonies, interviews, scandals, jubilees, funerals, weddings, and public grief, all mediated by television and later digital platforms. For Elizabeth herself, the coronation fixed an image of youth joined to duty. She did not invent the office, and she did not control all the forces around it. But she became the visible point where post-war Britain, constitutional monarchy, religious ritual, Commonwealth politics, and television culture met. The young queen at the Abbey was both a person and a symbol. The ceremony asked viewers to believe that service could bridge the distance between inherited authority and democratic society. The afterlife of June 2, 1953, is therefore larger than the crown placed on one head. It marks a threshold in public history. The old language of monarchy remained, but it had entered the age of mass broadcasting. The imperial frame remained, but it was already being rewritten by independence movements and Commonwealth politics. The public wanted tradition, but it wanted to see it for itself. The coronation of Elizabeth II was not the end of the old Britain or the birth of a new one. It was the moment when both stood in the same nave, under television lights, while the world watched.